Number 5 on this list is St. Mary's Catholic Church. This is a Catholic church in Nashville, Tennessee that is apparently deeply haunted. World on Fire says there are 3 ghosts rumored to haunt this church and its grounds. One story holds that a priest died during construction of the church. Another story claims that during the Civil War, a Catholic priest serving as a chaplain for the Confederate Army was shot and killed in the church. There's another rumor that the ghost is the spirit of Bishop Richard Pius Miles, the first bishop of Diocese of Nashville, who died in 1860. He was buried in the church basement and supposedly still haunts his old stomping grounds. According to one story from 1937, a pounding at his bedroom door woke up a priest in the rectory, but he could find no one there. After he fell asleep, he was woken up again, this time by a pounding on the headboard of his bed. There was no one in his room, so the awakening was attributed to supernatural causes by superstitious locals. I can't say that I personally would substitute a ghost pounding on my headboard's wake-up call for a regular alarm clock, but hey, whatever gets you out of bed in the morning, right? Nowadays, the 3 ghosts that wander around here are sort of just part of the church and accepted among those who pray and worship here. Apparently these ghosts are relatively calm and won't cause too much trouble other than the occasional midnight stomping, that is. There was, however, one story where the chaplain for the Confederate Army ghost attacked someone. It happened over 50 years ago now, but apparently a woman and her young son were walking past the church and got bombarded by this ghost. They both managed to get out okay, but they were obviously really shaken up. Now, nobody knows why this ghost did this or what the story was, but we think that this woman and her son were descendants of someone who had dealings with him in real life. Potentially their grandfather killed this man or something along those lines. It's all a bit hazy, but the good thing is that's the only group of people his ghost has ever chosen to attack before. Other than that, these ghosts are just relatively annoying, but they shouldn't cause you too much problems if you go here. Number 4 on this list is the widow. There was a widow who lived in the 20th century who was a very devout Catholic. For some reason, this woman, who we're going to call Ruth, had a very strong connection to the spirits that were in purgatory. Her story goes like this. The first soul Ruth encountered was her departed husband. He had often been impatient during his bout with cancer and had reproached God. One evening, Ruth heard a voice. That happened almost every evening over a long time when she came in from the stable. Then she suddenly recognizes the voice of her husband, but she isn't quite sure yet. Then she kneels down and just prays the rosary. She recommends her husband in particular. Yes, she thinks, he was often rather impatient. Is that perhaps the reason he must still do penance? A few evenings later, she sees a nebulous apparition right in the middle of the room. She takes holy water and prays, "O Lord, give him eternal rest." It makes her very upset, and then she sees her husband. He speaks quietly. "Don't be afraid, Ruth, it's me. I may come here to ask your help. Pray 3 chaplets each day." And then he was gone. So every day she prays 3 chaplets. Each time she adds, "Good God, forgive my husband his impatience when he suffered." After some weeks, her husband stands again in the middle of the room. He looks well. He's friendly and beautiful. She recalls how he was a young man. He says nothing. He only looks at her so grateful and full of love. Then she asks him, "How are you, Jacob?" He answers clearly and quietly, "I'm fine. I may come soon. I thank you, Ruth. I thank you so much." And after this, he never appeared again. So that's a pretty famous story, and Ruth went on to interact with many ghosts like this in purgatory through her life. In fact, some people started to speculate that she may even be a ghost herself as well. Number 3 on this list is the Most Holy Trinity Church. Here we have another Catholic church that's meant for worship, but has been riddled by a haunting. World on Fire says there are a few possible origins of the hauntings that supposedly plague this old parish. One claims that the current church building, built from 1882 to 1885, stands over an old cemetery where some bodies are still buried. Supposedly, the ghosts of the folk under the church haunt the building and mysteriously turn lights on and off, open and close doors, and walk back and forth. Or it could just be living people doing those things, since those activities, believe it or not, are not limited to ghosts. The living can also open doors and turn on lights. At least they could last time I checked. Or maybe I'm a ghost and I don't even know it. Anyways, another source of the ghost legend is that one of the first pastors of the church, Monsignor Michael May, passed away in his bedroom and continues to haunt the church grounds. Apparently, visitors hear mysterious steps at all hours of the night, and dogs have been known to stare as if in a trance at the stairs and dining room of the rectory. In all honesty, dogs staring at things, definitely not indisputable ghostly evidence. I mean, I've seen dogs do some weird stuff before, so I don't think that we can prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt based on their activities. However, it is very important to note nonetheless, whenever a big storm is coming, watch what your animals do. I bet that they'll go and hide or act differently right before a massive thunderstorm or a tornado or something. Us humans, we don't even notice it, we don't sense it at all, but they definitely will. This sort of weird sense, it also translates to ghosts as well, so maybe the dog really is seeing something from the afterlife at this church. Number 2 on this list is Annelise Michelle. This is a very sad story where there may not ever have been any ghosts involved, but they sure thought that there was. Wikipedia says, when Michelle was 16, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she had become intolerant of various religious objects and began to hear voices. Her condition worsened despite medication, and she became suicidal, also displaying other symptoms for which she took medication as well. After the taking of psychiatric medications for 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Michelle and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism. While rejected at first, true priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priests began conducting exorcism sessions, and the parents stopped consulting doctors. Annelise Michelle stopped eating food and died of malnourishment and dehydration after 67 exorcism sessions. Michelle's parents and the 2 Roman Catholic priests were found guilty of negligent homicide and were sentenced to 6 months in jail as well as a fine. This might not be the most terrifying of all of the ghost stories on here, considering the only real ghost involved was the fear that everybody had to begin with. Poor Annelise would have went through absolute agony in her final days when there probably wasn't any paranormal activity to even begin with. And finally, number 1 on this list is St. Rita's Church. Several decades ago, there was one heck of a ghostly interaction that went down at this church. World on Fire says, on All Souls Day in the early 1960s, St. Rita's Parish had a ghostly visitation. More than a dozen parishioners had gathered there to pray when sometime in the early evening the organ began to play by itself. Suddenly, 6 robed monks appeared, 3 wearing black and 3 wearing white. The parishioners attempted to flee, but they found the doors of the church were locked. The phantom monks moved towards the parishioners while the organ continued its dirge. Finally, the vision faded as a disembodied voice whispered, "Pray for us." So next time you see a ghost, it probably just wants to ask you a favor and hopefully not kill you. All they were asking for was a little prayer, which I think everyone would have been more than happy to indulge with at that time. Of course, having a bunch of ghost monks show up out of nowhere, lock all of the doors, and keep you in there, that's pretty terrifying. Everyone is still very wary around St. Rita's Church in case these monks ever do come back.
Number 5, Pazuzu. Our first terrifying demon up on this list has made quite the career for himself in pop culture. He's picked up some small gigs here and there. He's serving as a sort of mascot of sorts for the real fake band Gorillaz, multiple cameos on Futurama, and won some acclaim for his star-studded role in The Exorcist, possessing Reagan and making us all afraid of pea soup. Although his real historical background is far more interesting than any of his pop culture appearances. Pazuzu has been around for a long time, first being recorded as a Babylonian demon wind god, who was always playing both sides, so he'd come out on top. He was a god of wind, and it was thought that the wind ravaging, storms, and locusts were all byproducts of Pazuzu's rage. But he was also thought to be a protector. He would protect the home, taking a particular liking to watching over pregnant women. He was an incredibly destructive force in nature, and when it would come time to throw down, Pazuzu would fly across the world, breaking the wings of other demons to prevent them from getting into any trouble. Sort of like a demonic Batman. His portrayal in The Exorcist is probably where most people know him from and assume those things about him, where he's seen as a much more plain Jane possessing demon, lacking his impressive wings and other traits, and not doing a whole lot of flying around or anything with the wind, focusing a lot more on projectile vomiting and harassing a couple of priests. The real Pazuzu is a lot cooler than his Exorcist appearance, but no doubt more people know about that than they do an ancient Babylonian wind god. I don't think I'd like to spend much time with either incarnation face to face, and those priests definitely didn't want to either. Now ghouls, goblins, lend me your ears, and subscribe if you wouldn't mind. Number 4. Balthagore. Now another demon who's had his moment in pop culture. Maybe you recognize Balthagore from Supernatural's first fledgling season, all the way back when the boys were wide-eyed and hadn't even died once yet. Or maybe if you're a Persona fan, you recognize Balthagore as the perpetually bored demon on the can. It's a video game with a talking cat. And you play as a guy who's got a healthy sleep schedule and can manage his social circle well. It's not a game focused on realism. But it turns out, doing a little research, there was a reason for this foul demon's appearance. One of the 7 princes of hell, the demonic icon of sloth's favorite offering isn't blood or a fresh goat, but a little mud pie, feces if you want to get scientific with it. Look, I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to ask what he's doing with it. Old lore just says that if you wanted to summon Balthagore, you had to bring him a lot of feces. There's no metric volume ever listed, just a lot. If you do summon him, he'll trade you wondrous riches, expand your ability to discover new things, expand your consciousness, but at the cost of the temptation of your mortal soul, and you'll also probably never be able to wash your hands clean again. I'm sorry, I don't usually work so blue. It's the lazy man's comedy, although perchance that's fitting for the demon prince of sloth. Balthagore has been depicted in all manner of ways over the years, appearing sometimes as esoteric things like tree branches, or sometimes taking the form of beautiful women. But one wood carving in the 18th century of him sitting on an 18th century John sealed his fate pretty much forever, and then since then, he's almost always been depicted as a horned demon sitting on a throne of sorts. Balthagore, I want to make something clear here. I'm not making fun of you. I'm trying to make sense of all this. Number 3, the Legion. Now, this next demon is a tiny bit of a cheat because although it's supposed to be a top 5 list, I'm about to make it a top 500,000 list. This next demon is known as the Legion, for it is many. The Legion's first documented recording is from the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus Christ encountered a man possessed by a demon. When he spoke to the man in an effort to exorcise him, he asked for the name of the demon inside him, and the man responded, Legion, for there were many devils inside him. Upon being exorcised from the man, the Legion asked if it could instead be transferred to a herd of pigs, which he then obliged. Now the Legion is pretty atypical when it comes to demons. It's not the prince of anything, it's not the manifestation of any one sin, and it's not any one thing at all. The Legion is made of countless demons that all function together in unison like a hive mind. When one has a thought, the rest of the Legion obeys. When one member of the Legion speaks, the rest of them speak all at once. Now sometimes the armies of Satan are referred to as the legions of hell, but I guess the Legion is a separate thing altogether. It must make filling out forms very difficult. No one's really sure what sort of demons the Legion are or what they look like even. It's just agreed that there's a lot of them all working together on their common goals. Like I said, no one really knows what they look like, but if you've ever seen a horde of, anything all in one place, you can't imagine that it would be anything pleasant. Now the Legion isn't as much of a pop culture starlet as some of the other demons I've mentioned on this list, but that doesn't mean that it's influenced things in pop culture. The phrase Legion, for we are many, appears in all sorts of different things, probably because it's just a very cool way to describe yourself. A recurring boss fight in the Castlevania video games called Legion appears as a writhing mass of bodies, no doubt inspired by the story. And the character in Mass Effect, named Legion, is an AI life form comprised of thousands of individual AI working in tandem, who directly references the story, introducing itself, saying, "We are Legion, for we are many." And while I'm on it, Legion was the entire best character in Mass Effect, but that's neither here nor there. Sleep easy, big guy. Number 2, Beelzebub. Now we're getting into the big hitters. Beelzebub is thought to be one of the first angels to have ever fallen to hell, alongside Leviathan and Lucifer himself. He and Lucifer actually have a bit of an identity crisis, as the two are sometimes thought to be interchangeable. They must have similar haircuts. Some demonologists argue that Beelzebub is another name for Lucifer, and some others pose that he's one of his most trusted lieutenants. But whatever Beelzebub is, everyone can agree that he's pretty horrifying. His history is fairly interesting. It's thought that his namesake is a mockery of the god Baal, an ancient Bronze Age god of fertility. Some scholars believe that Beelzebub's name comes from Beelzebub, translating to Lord of the Flies, inferring that the followers of Baal are nothing more than flies worshipping a dung god. They didn't get the memo that Balthagore was the dung god. The Lord of the Flies sort of ended up becoming Beelzebub's title, with almost all depictions of the demon featuring flies in ubiquitous amounts around him. Occasionally he's even depicted as a giant fly. It's very Kafkaesque. Beelzebub is said to be one of the most powerful demons inside of Hell's domain, capable of great control over humanity, able to tempt them. Beelzebub was cited during the Salem witch trials as the entity that had corrupted and swayed so many women to witchery. Now there's some discrepancy as to what sin Beelzebub is thought to preside over, with some offerings saying that he represents pride, some others saying that he represents gluttony, which I would say probably seems a little more fitting for a fly demon anyway, and he's most commonly associated with gluttony. Number 1, Asmodeus. Yeah, it probably would have made a lot of sense to have Lucifer as the number 1 spot on this list. I mean, he's the king of hell and all that. So let's just take this moment, give him an honorable mention, and say he's at the number 0 spot, just because I thought it was a little obvious, and I'm pretty sure you know who Satan is, and there's other demons we could talk about, bring up some unknown ones. So filling in at the number 1 spot is Asmodeus, one of the princes of hell and the embodiment of the cardinal sin of lust. Asmodeus fell from heaven alongside the other fallen angels, reforming as a prince of hell. Asmodeus is said to have been married to Lilith, the primordial she-demon, famed for her banishing from the Garden of Eden and famed for destroying Fraser Crane. Lilith was cursed and banished for her defilement and depicted as a temptress, and Asmodeus saw all that and was like, hey girl, I'm into all that stuff. You want to procreate an endless stream of demons into the world and reign over a dominion of chaos? And the rest is wedded bliss. Depictions of Asmodeus vary pretty wildly from case to case. Occasionally he's drawn as a handsome young fella, but most commonly he's depicted as a squat, vaguely humanoid creature with a rooster leg, the tail of a snake, 3 heads, comprising of a bull, a goat, and a scruffy demon head as the center. Asmodeus presides over lust with the help of his beloved Lilith, and the two tempt humans with madness and desire to ruin people with lechery. Somehow this wasn't enough for Asmodeus though, as some stories also describe Asmodeus as having command over the betting halls of hell and is responsible for tempting man's souls towards gambling. So what I am hearing from this is that Asmodeus probably parties harder than any demon out there. Number 5, Mammon. There's nothing wrong with wanting a little, right? It's nice to want. Nothing better than having a little money and power. For most of us who weren't born into a Fortune 500 lineage, it might be a little bit tricky, unless you got a little bit help. Maybe like from Mammon, the embodiment of human greed. He's actually a lot more generous than his position as greed demon might suggest. You don't have to do too much. If you just give over your eternal soul and pledge yourself to an eternity in his service, he might reward you with great riches. That's a pretty solid transaction. Mammoth is thought to originate from an ancient word for wealth, and it's thought that this is where Mammon was first born from. He was mankind's inherent desire for wealth and greed, twisted out of subconscious want. The Gospel of Luke and Matthew both directly quote this, saying, "You cannot serve both God and Mammon," meaning you can't have a pious life and also find yourself on a quest for massive wealth, and later taken literally to mean you can't serve one of the 7 princes of hell if you worship God. Mammon is greedy. Makes sense? He's real greedy. It's said that of all the archdukes and princes of hell, Mammon is more concerned with staring at the gold pavement than any of Lucifer's rebellion or business of the heavens, taken to mean that Mammon doesn't really concern himself with anything that doesn't involve cold, hard coin. He is on that grind set 24/7. The demon of greed has taken many forms over the years, with his most consistent depiction being that of a fairly normal-looking humanoid, looming over his subjects in a giant golden throne, looking down on those who would call for his aid. He's also associated with a wolf, and is believed to be able to take the form of one for his dealings on Earth. It's said that part of the arcane ritual to evoke Mammon's spirit is to imagine your spirit as a golden wolf calling out to him. If you do invoke Mammon, just be sure you're being reasonable with what you ask for. You never know what happens if you get too greedy. Abezathibu. It's said that when the rebellion began, Lucifer fell from heaven and was cast out alongside the other fallen angels. Well, who were the lesser-known fallen angels? Abezathibu is an obscure demon, but a threatening one nonetheless, and a very difficult name to pronounce. In the Testament of Solomon, the demon Abezathibu introduces himself as a threat to God's will, and anyone who serves God. Abezathibu rules over some dominions of hell, serving as one of Lucifer's trusted lieutenants. He was originally an angel, but unhappy, and when cast out with the rest of them, fell to earth, disfigured and vengeful. As he fell out of the kingdom of heaven, the other angels desperately grabbed at his wings to try and retrieve him. But instead of restraining him, the process ripped his wing from his back, leaving Abezathibu with a singular, dark, monstrous red wing. Although, I doubt he minds much, because to be honest, that sounds sick as all hell. It probably works really well for his demon aesthetic. Abezathibu presides over the pits of Tartarus, a unique dimension in hell originating from Greek mythology as a depth of the underworld. Abezathibu is a powerful sorcerer, boasting to King Solomon that he's far superior to the prophet Moses in every way. He brags of his sorcery and magic, being able to shift ideas and human perception in his favor, conjuring miracles, wonders, and form signs to humans, and is even able to bestow his gift to humans in exchange for favor. Abezathibu takes a particular personal pleasure in torturing God's servants out of his twisted malice for the heavens above. Thankfully, Abezathibu's cruelty was his undoing. When Moses parted the Red Sea, Abezathibu wanted to be there to see it in person, or in demon, I guess. When the Red Sea closed yet again, Abezathibu was trapped inside a pillar of air, but Beelzebub is confident he will return again. Number 3. Samael. Samael is one of the more interesting entries on this list, namely because depending on the text cited, he's either an archangel of heaven or a fallen angel serving in hell. Angels to some, demons to others, and all that. He's often referred to as the original Grim Reaper, and is thought to be where depictions of the Soul Collector stem from. Samael across most texts is known as the Angel of Death, a title that precedes itself. I mean, you hear the Angel of Death and you know I probably should not be messing with that guy, because I'm pretty sure they also call John Wick that sometimes. It's said that on the hour of a person's final release from this mortal coil, Samael will descend upon them, wings extended and sword drawn, dripping at its tip the poison that takes your life. Samael's name actually translates to Venom of God, again, in case you're wondering just how nice this guy is. Samael is known as the Accuser, the Seducer, the Destroyer, and a Midnight Joker. Samael's role as the Seducer is an essential one to the Kingdom of Heaven. He's seen as good and evil in the same measure, but he is only serving God's will. Tempting mankind is Samael's lot in life. It's been said as well that Samael is the one who planted the tree of knowledge and was the serpent who tempted Adam and Eve to bite the fruit. When Abraham was tested by God to sacrifice Isaac, it was said that Samael was the one who whispered into their ears to disobey. It's said that his ultimate goal is to bring an end to death itself, including the very concept of it. Once he's finished his ultimate mission, he'll be annihilated himself, and with death undone, his mission complete. Number 2. Mephistopheles. Imagine you could make a deal for whatever you wanted, no matter how outrageous the request. Power, influence, romance. If all it took was your soul, would you do it? Well, that's the offer Mephistopheles is prepared to make you. One of the most sinister servants in hell, Mephistopheles, or Mephisto as he's sometimes referred to, is one of Lucifer's right-hand men. Responsible for bargains and deals involving human souls, Mephistopheles takes a great sickening pleasure in luring wayward souls downwards to the underworld. If Mephistopheles has already made himself present to you, I'm afraid it's already too late to you. He doesn't go out of his way to corrupt and tempt the innocent the way other demons do, but rather he finishes the job for those who've already begun to falter on a path they can't return from. In some instances, Mephistopheles' role changes slightly. Sometimes he appears to trick people into damning themselves. In others, they're already damned and he's just finishing off the inevitable. Most famously is the legend he originates from, where the bet he places with Faust for his soul, the protagonist of the ancient German legend, who made a deal at a crossroads with Mephistopheles. In exchange for ultimate power and the servitude of Mephistopheles while Faust lives, when he passes, Faust's soul will become the property of Mephistopheles and he will enslave him and damn him for eternity. Faust got what he was promised, and the terms Faust and Faustian now became synonymous with hard bargains out of this legend. Mephistopheles knows that he's essential to the cycle of the world. He knows that as much as we hate him, we need him. He tells Faust that he's part of the dark chaos that gives birth to the light. Sure, he's offering people in exchange for eternal damnation for mortal goods, but he is inspiring people in his own twisted little way. He's trying to get you to do better so you won't hear him knocking. Number 1. Leviathan. As far as demons go, who's a bigger threat than the Leviathan? I mean, how could there even be a bigger threat? Leviathan, it's in the name. Just let that sit in your mouth for a bit and think of something big. Leviathan is thought to be the embodiment of the sin of envy, and he is one of the princes of hell and the grand admiral of hell's armies. It's tasked with pushing man towards temptation and the sin of heresy. Leviathan manifests itself as a behemoth of a creature, an incomprehensibly large sea serpent that would make H.P. Lovecraft blush. It's said to have impenetrable armored scales all over its body, and has monstrous claws as well, capable of destroying anything it would ever have to battle against, should that ever arise. It's said that it can conjure up mighty bursts of flame from its chest like a dragon. Leviathan serves as the gatekeeper of hell, with the mighty demon's very jaws serving as the gates to the underworld themselves. Said as well that Leviathan's own flesh makes up the foundations for the walls of hell, and it feasts upon souls that attempt to escape the underworld. Foolishly, of course. As far as demonic power levels go, making up the literal corners of the underworld have got to count for something. How many demons can claim to be so hardcore they practically are hell? I can see why he's such a trusted lieutenant